Good evening and welcome to CYC News for today, the 12th of February 2017 and the 5th of Amshir 1733 AM. I'm Justina Tuadros, and in today's headlines, Netanyahu calls on responsible nations to sanction Iran, 13,000 people are hanged in secret at a Syrian prison, Israel's parliament passes the West Bank's outpost bill, and Nicolas Sarkozy, former French president, will face campaign fraud trial. Texas border officers find nearly 2 tons of weed camouflaged as limes, and lasers help doctors remove brain cancer. To our top story, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has welcomed new sanctions imposed by the Trump administration on Iran, saying its continued nuclear weapons program posed to threat the world. Speaking in London as he met British Prime Minister Theresa May, Netanyahu said Iran sought to conquer the Middle East and had to be reined in. He called for responsible nations to follow the lead of the US, which last week imposed fresh sanctions in response to Iran's latest ballistic missiles test. Mr. Netanyahu said that Iran seeks to conquer the Middle East. It threatens Europe, it threatens the West, and it threatens the world. It offers provocation after provocation. Addressing Ms. May, Mr. Netanyahu added, "That's why I welcome Mr. President Trump's insistence on new sanctions against Iran. I think other nations should follow suit, certainly responsible nations, and I'd like to talk to you about how we can ensure Iran's aggression does not go unanswered." Iran denies the January 29 test violation, a UN resolution, saying that it had a right to carry out such exercises in defense of its country. Netanyahu has been steadfastly opposed to a nuclear deal with Iran, brokered by the Obama administration, that saw sanctions on the country relaxed in exchange for a dramatic downsizing of Iran's nuclear program. The Israeli leader has called the accord weak. A Downing Street spokesman said that Britain shared a concern about Iran's missile test. He said, "It was discussed at the UN and we made clear our position with regard to the specific agreement in relation to the nuclear weapons. It's important that it is very carefully and rigorously policed. We should also be clear that it has neutralized the possibility of Iranians acquiring nuclear weapons for more than a decade." In the US, a growing number of senators from both parties plan to ratchet up their push to stiffen sanctions on Russia and demand Congress have the final say in President Donald Trump decides to weaken penalties on the countries unilaterally. The move by 6 senators in the latest warning from Capitol Hill to a new administration over US-Russian relations. On Wednesday, a group led by Senators Lindsey Graham and Ben Cardin planned to introduce legislation that would impose strict new congressional oversight and veto power over the Trump administration if it decided to lift sanctions on Russia. According to a summary of the measure provided to CNN, the Russia Review Act would require the White House to submit a report detailing why it was seeking to lift sanctions. This would set into motion a 120-day review period where Congress would vote to disapprove of easing the penalties on the country. Senator Marco Rubio, member of the Senate Foreign Relations Affairs, is co-sponsoring the Graham-Cardin measure, along with Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill of Missouri, Sherrod Brown of Ohio, and Republican John McCain of Arizona. Rubio said support is broad within the Senate to push back against the White House if it eased sanctions before Russia pulls out Ukraine, potentially enough to overcome any Trump veto. Rubio told CNN, "I think if there was a real threat of lifting sanctions minus the respect for Ukrainian sovereignty and meeting those conditions, my sense is that we would have the votes to pass that in the Senate and be able to pass it with a veto-proof majority." The new measure comes as roughly a dozen senators from both parties are quietly lobbying their colleagues to endorse a separate bill that would impose a comprehensive set of sanctions against Russia. Picking up new support for their effort, including a member of the GOP leadership team, Senator Cory Gardner of Colorado. The under-the-radar moves underscores the growing concern on the Hill that Trump's openness to Vladimir Putin could prompt the United States to rebuild democratic ties with Russia, despite Washington's furious opposition to the host of Russia's actions, including its annexation of Crimea and alleged cyber attacks during the US election. And it comes as lawmakers in both parties have pushed back at Trump's comments over the weekend, when he seemed to equate the US military actions with violence spurring Putin's government. To Syria, in what is very disturbing and shocking relation. Thousands of people have been hanged at a Syrian prison in a secret crackdown on dissent by the regime of Bashar al-Assad, according to a report by Amnesty International. The human rights group says as many as 13,000 people have been executed at Sayyadna prison, north of the capital Damascus, in a hidden campaign authorized by the senior regime figures. Amnesty reports titles "Human Slaughterhouses" says prisoners are moved in the middle of the night from their cells under the pretext of being transferred. They are taken to the grounds of the prison where they are hanged, likely unaware of their fate, until they feel the noose around their neck. However, according to the state-run news agency SANA, the Syrian Ministry of Justice disclaimed the accusations, calling them part of an effort to harm the government's international reputation after recent victories over rebels. In Jerusalem, Israel's parliament passed legislation on Monday that aims to legalize about 3,000 housing units built on private Palestinian land in the West Bank. The so-called regularization law passed the Knesset, Israel's parliament, in a 60-52 vote. Many of the housing units are located in the outposts, the term for small, unsanctioned communities that have sprung up in the West Bank over the last 20 years. Unlike settlements, they are not recognized or authorized by Israel, even though many are close to existing settlements. The vote further complicates efforts to reach a two-state solution in the long-standing Israeli-Palestinian conflict over land rights. Officials from both sides of the debate characterized the vote as a clear stop towards annexation of the West Bank. The vote follows Israel's announcement last week that it plans to build a new settlement in the West Bank, despite a UN Security Council resolution in December condemning Israeli settlement construction. Before the vote, Nicolas Sarkozy, the United Nations Special Coordinator for the Middle East peace process, urged Israeli legislators to reconsider adopting the measure, noting that Israel's Attorney General had deemed it unconstitutional. Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy will face trial on charges of campaign financing fraud. According to his lawyer, Herzog confirmed that Sarkozy is accused of illegally financing his failed re-election campaign. The 62-year-old, who was beaten by Francis Hollande 5 years ago, is set to appeal against the trial, according to Reuters. Reuters says Herzog described the order as inane and said that only one of the two magistrates in charge of the case actually signed the order. According to Reuters, he said a statement, "The clear disagreement between the two magistrates in charge of the matter is such a rare event that it is worth underlying, as it illustrates the inanity of the decision." At first glance, these limes look like a normal shipment of green fruit, but they don't contain the citrus juice you would squeeze into your margarita on a hot summer's day. Instead, the phony limes were packed full of marijuana. US Customs and Border Protection officer in Pharr, Texas, seized a total of 3,947 pounds of weed in the commercial shipment of key limes on January 30, officials said. The truck hauled to the produce crossed to Pharr Reyno's International Bridge along the Texas-Mexico border near the Gulf of Mexico. Over 34,000 of the fake fruit packages were discovered by an imaging inspection system and narcotics K9 team. Port Director Ephraim Solis Jr. said in a statement, "This is an outstanding interception of narcotics. Our CBP officers continue to excel in their knowledge of smuggling techniques, which allow them to intercept these kinds of attempts to introduce narcotics into our country." The drugs are valued at approximately $789,460 according to the US Customs and Border Protection statement. The case is under the investigation by the Department of Homeland Security. In health news, there has been a breakthrough with the use of lasers. A new study shows that lasers can help surgeons rapidly analyze brain cancers and decide how much tissue to remove. It is a difficult decision as taking too little leads to the cancer coming back, while too much could lead to disability. The technique, called SRS microscopy, has been tried on more than 360 patients at the University of Michigan Medical School and Harvard University. The next stage is for it to be tested in the full clinical trials. One of the researchers, Dr. Daniel Oringer, says brain cancer is like a cloud. You can define the center, but the edges are really hard to discern. In other cancers, such as bowel cancer, doctors would just take some of the non-essential surrounding tissues as well. However, there is a non-essential tissue in the brain. Karen Wijemir, a preschool teacher in Michigan, is a type of patient who would have been benefited from this technology. She needed 2 operations in quick succession to remove her brain tumour. 2 years ago, she had a massive seizure in the middle of the night, and doctors found a growth in her brain. But while surgeons removed some of the cancer, they did not get it all. Karen told BBC News that it would have spread a lot of anxiety and anguish and pain. She had 2 craniotomies, a procedure that removes part of the skull. Side effects from the procedure include weeks of bad headaches, about 4 months total recovery time, and a lot of time off school. She still has regular scans to ensure there is no growth of the tumour left in her brain. To sport, well, he might be 35, but the Canadian veteran Eric Geyer just became a ski world champion to join the recent list of mid-30-year-olds, proving age is just a number. It's only February and already Roger Federer, Serena Williams and Tom Brady have shown to be the youngsters that don't have a monopoly on vim and vigour. Sometimes age and experience can trump youthful energy. Geyer hadn't won for almost 3 years when he became skiing's oldest world champion with victory in the Super G at Glitzy St. Martez. The 2011 downhill world champion edged out Olympic champion Kay Jetil Jans Rudd. Aged 31, will follow Canadian Manuel Osborne Paradise, grabbing 3rd on his 33rd birthday. Guyer's achievement comes 3 days after his 39-year-old quarter comeback. Bradley steered the New England Patriots to a remarkable Super Bowl victory after trailing Atlanta Falcons 28-3 in the 3rd quarter. It was Brady's 5th Super Bowl title, all with the Patriots coming 15 years after his first. In both games, Bradley was named Most Valuable Player. Federer is another 35-year-old still forming at the top of his game. The Swiss won a men's record 18th Grand Slam singles titles last month when he beat Spain's Rafael Nadal in thrilling 5-set Australian Open final. It was Federer's first Grand Slam title since Wimbledon in 2012 and first final since the 2015 US Open. Also in Melbourne, Serena Williams struck a blow for older women with a record 23rd Grand Slam singles titles at 35 years old. Well, it looked like age is just a number after all. What an outstanding sportsman. And that's all for CYC News. A reminder that you can watch this news bulletin again throughout the week on YouTube. I'm Justina Tawadros from the CYC studios in Sydney, Australia. Have a good night.